What is the reason why we can't move on this thing, on these fire standards, or what's the hang-up?
It needs to go through the board, and we now have a draft ready to go.
So there was research conducted that my understanding from reading it is that legally the county can do this if they would like to. There have been for quite some time minimum fire standards that were adopted by the Rogue Valley Fire Chiefs Association, which is Josephine and Jackson County. And then there is a draft ordinance that basically establishes a franchise system by which private fire service companies can certify that they meet those minimum standards, and then they are allowed to operate in Josephine County. And then there's actually some relief, is that the right word, if they are operating without that franchise, or they have not met the minimum standards. Perhaps something's been allowed to lapse and they no longer qualify.
So we just need the ordinance.
Sure.
You have seen. Have you seen the draft?
I don't know if I've seen a most recent draft.
Yeah.
Has it changed?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I have not seen a most recent draft.
Well, the most recent one is the one that was most recently discussed.
Oh, okay. So nothing's happened with that. Yeah.
So
really blunt.
Yeah, because that's what we're.
Yeah. Okay. So and trying to be objective, but basically you're going to get accused of putting somebody out of business and telling it this is what you're looking at. Okay,
right.
Putting somebody out of business and limiting people's options in regards to protecting their home and property.
They're not putting anybody out of business if they meet the standards. All they have to do is meet standards.
We've gone through a wonderful example of what happens when somebody gets a portion of information, expands it, caresses it to come up with something that has nothing to do with the topic at hand, and spams it out to all of their people on the email list, and people go ballistic because now you're only going to have one fire company in the county. And then everybody gets all stirred up and hot and bothered about it. And it has nothing to do with accomplishing a goal that I believe needs to be accomplished. But how do we accomplish that realistically? And that's the struggle. That's really what this whole thing is about. And we go from there. But I think there are some good points that we do need to wrestle through and look at. Were you going to say something else?
Yeah, I was going to try to equate this to something like the LDAC recommendations, and this predates you guys on the board, but what we did is we tried to put together a group of respected, educated experts on the subject of land use and come together with those elements that are what do we need to do to improve our code. This is kind of a similar situation, in my opinion. Hopefully we'll have a better outcome than LDAC did, because those just kind of sat there. But I will work on those before the end of my term, I guarantee it. I just need a planning director, a new planning director who's got the time and the energy to do it. But from this perspective, I think we need the people who know this issue in the room on a set committee who can take these comments and say, okay, well, this one's going to work and that one's not going to work. But you guys haven't thought of this. And those kinds of elements, putting them together and then saying, well, here is our recommended product. Then we take a look at it and say, well, this works for us. No, you can't do that. And then, put something out there and see if it goes.
Well, and do you mind if we ask Lang to come up here, because he's been familiar with this whole thing?
Okay.
Don't mind. You don't want to point your fingers at Jenny because she's just new to the process and the whole thing too, as far as this goes on. But yeah, that's right. Everybody's underway. What's going on? This is not the development of this sitting board. I mean, this has been going on for years and years. And the Fire Chiefs Association been the main catalyst, the main actors on this whole process too. And kudos to them and their patience of beating their head against the wall oftentimes. But this does represent a baseline to me, a baseline of our actions. Where do we go from here? How do we want to look at this. I agree with what you're saying. I mean, my presupposition is I think these are something that are needed, but they need to be understood clearly by the citizenry of the county. If they're not, then we're simply setting ourselves up for a fiasco and a waste of everybody's time. But it needs to be gotten right before we try to do anything else with it, my personal belief. Otherwise, we defeat the whole process in the end, because once this goes up for a vote and everybody goes no, well, then this is dead in the water for years after that. So, wanting to try to make it as right as possible. What do you see as the Fire District, Fire Chiefs Association? What do you see as a reasoned process to take all this hard work that you guys have put together and represented and had input on, as far as a next step, and pardon the use of the word selling this product, but what do you see as a next step as far as that goes?
Well, I think any public process is extremely important for the same reason you talked about, and that is that the people need to know what's out there, what the challenges are, what the struggles are, what the liabilities are. Definitely the fire service has changed dramatically over the last 30 years in terms of those liabilities. From what I've read in there, the majority of that work is the culmination of about 25 years or more, almost 3 decades of efforts on behalf of the county to take before public committees, to do the massaging, to do the work. It's definitely evolved as a result of that. The standards that are in there from the last evolution of it back in 2007 are really part of the work that was done through the Chiefs Associations to come up with some minimum standards, because we were struggling not having them here in the county to begin with. And we knew we couldn't go much longer without doing, especially with the amount of liability that we were facing as public agencies starting to grow more and more each and every year. So I think the iteration of that is from all those public processes up to that point, and then the roll-in of the adopted standard or policy that the Chiefs Association created that really outlined what was expected to be the minimum standard for any startup, basic volunteer fire department that might come to the county. And all of those standards really don't talk about performance. They're all about just basic, common sense business practices. Mm-hmm. Are you complying with the basic essential things that any board like yourselves or a special district would have to struggle with in order to provide good, adequate, minimum services to the community in a safe and effective manner? And for the Chiefs Association, it's really about safety. It is about the safety of the community, knowing that the services that are being delivered meet some kind of a minimum standard. But it's also about safety for our troops, because public entities are really exposed when they start working with private entities that may or may not meet these minimum standards or any standards whatsoever during the fire service.
Well, I think that's one of the things that is not clearly understood either. When we think of our fire department in Josephine County, there is no fire department in Josephine County. There are public agencies that are providing fire. There are private agencies that are providing fire coverage.
Correct. And
the same rules are hard to apply to both of them. But in this big picture, do we want them all, regardless, public or private, do we all want them to have a baseline set of regulations that we could go, we know that they all agree. If you're licensed to be a fire service in Josephine County, we know that you've met these criteria.
Yeah, to me, it's about, if you're a resident and you have a fire truck show up in your yard and somebody walks into your house, there is an ultimate expectation, I believe, as a citizen, that is a qualified, squared away, liability coverage individual who's coming in to deliver good, adequate service to you. And you should have that expectation, regardless of who you're paying for, whether it be a public agency or a private agency. It's about doing the right thing and making sure that that's good, honest services that are there. And I think anybody who's in the business to do it would want to do the same thing. That's what the public entity side of it, because it really is about the public service all the way through, from the beginning to the end.
Now, for a fire service that is up and running, that they have to meet federal OSHA rules and all kinds of things, why are those not sufficient in order to have these additional rules and regulations? I mean, if I have to qualify for the Oregon laws and federal laws for OSHA, for instance, So why would those not be sufficient here in this situation?
I guess the easiest answer to that is that they're not all-encompassing. Those laws, and it's like you talked to OSHA specifically, is about the protection of the employees themselves. And so it really governs whether you're using adequate training, whether you're using adequate protective equipment, whether it'd be like no different than if you're running any kind of a factory. The OSHA applications, the rules for their safety and health and welfare are all applied, but that doesn't necessarily cover whether the apparatus is adequate or not. It doesn't set any kind of expectation for a state-level standard for training like the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training does. So as you go through each one of those, what you'll find is if you were a startup business and you were looking at doing your due diligence to figure out what you needed to do in order to do an adequate level of service, that's what's highlighted. And so really it's not creating any new standards. Everything that's in there already exists. All it's doing is bringing it into one, what I see it doing is bringing everything into one box and saying, hey, if you're going to do this business, here's the standards that we expect you to meet. And they're all really pre-established standards. There's nothing new in there. There's nothing earth-shattering.
Well, I saw that with the liability insurance and the training, PTSD. So
There are more requirements on a contractor or on a taxi cab driver than there is for being a private party.
I mean, one thing that we can say for sure is that the master plan of this thing is not to establish only one fire department agency in the county. I mean,
Not at all. I don't think that's the intent at all.
That's impossible.
I know it sure has
we can't do it anyway.
Sure has a vibrant life on the with some folks. Mr. Legal Counsel, can we, and I'm not sure if this is answerable easily, yes or no, can we as a county mandate certain requirements or restrictions on a private business?
Yes.
So we can't, okay, that is...
Yeah.
well,
We do on ambulance service.
Yeah, true. That's right.
Yeah.
We do.
Equating it to the air service, and we had the pre-established kind of prerequisites for operating as an air service provider in Josephine County before we were presented with that challenge. There wouldn't have been probably all of our
challenge.
Yeah, it would have been, no, those are the rules. We don't care if there's 30 air ambulance service providers in Josephine County, but if you're going to be here, these are the rules.
So if I'm licensed by the GPSST, I think that is correct.
Department of Public
whatever it is. You know what I'm speaking of. If I'm licensed by them or certified by them or whatever the phrase might be, is that lesser than these requirements? In other words, I've got my little business and I'm licensed by these folks and I abide by the NFPA rules and regulations. Again, I mean, why these then to come in as an onerous, for the argument, some onerous burden that I have to go now meet this lesser, I meet the greater. So that's one of the arguments that's come up.
All right, and I can see where the confusion is at. So DPSST, as I read those, is part of it. That speaks specifically only to trainings and standards. And DPSST, years ago, had been struggling for a while because they do the certification levels for both police, fire, criminal justice system, corrections, etc. They have an obligation that if they're a state body who's certifying and training for those occupations, if you will, they needed to set minimum standards for what that level of training was going to be, but it also spoke very much to the ethics of the people who were doing that work. So they do background checks. And that's new. That's new for us in the fire service within the last 5 years. Beforehand, if you were a volunteer or even a full-time paid employee, unless that agency who was bringing you on board actually did a background check, you had no idea what their background is. So you had no idea who was walking into your house to provide you services, whether they were an ex-felon or whatever degree of criminal background that they might have been. DPSST, with all the liabilities that have come along over the years, has ratcheted up the requirements for that. And so that's speaking to it, but that only speaks to the training portion of it. That doesn't talk to you about the liability insurance. It doesn't talk to you about the equipment and its capabilities to perform, and whether it's in good shape or whether it's in run code 3 or not. There's different agencies across the board who regulate all that stuff. So it's not like you can go to just one stop you're certified to provide fire services agency, you have to see the full broad spectrum of it. And it's no different than I think for any of the other types of occupations that might be out there, like being a contractor, you know, or whether you're a doctor or whoever you might be as a professional service. There isn't just one-stop place to go to get all your certifications and trainings and qualifications to be able to provide the services, especially in the fire service because it's so multifaceted.
Do we know today how many, on this, whatever, page 7, do we know how many of the current service districts, stations, how many are departments, how many of them have currently a minimum of 24-hour on-duty staffing by station?
Not all of them. But I don't think the way I read that said that you had to have a minimum 24-hour station. I think it's talked about that if you're doing it, we'd like to know.
Yeah, this is a description of the current deployment or service delivery model applicable to fire suppression services, including, 1, minimum 24-hour on-duty staffing by station, 2, minimum on-call or reserve force on standby.
So that, to me, is the full spectrum of whether you're a small volunteer agency that doesn't have 24-hour staffing to the accommodation department where you have a little bit of both, to something like the city where you got full-time staffing. I think it's, to me, it was just saying, what are you doing for a service model and how are you doing it?
Yeah, but you can see that would cause some concern to think.
Well, and like you said, I think there's really good reasoning. And
yeah.
I think anytime you put anything like this, it has to go through a good public process. Dodge and those questions you're asking have to be approved and be able to answer.
You just want to define what the service is. What the meaning is to define what your service is. So doesn't mean you have to have every station manned 24/7.
And so that portion of it, when it was done by the Chiefs Association, was just a way to get a reference point. What are you doing? It wasn't about whether you had to meet a certain minimum.
You just have to describe what it is. If you're staffing the station 12 hours,
that was all
6 days or 7 days a week.
And I could see in this format where, being sure, absolutely. So
that paragraph
we have a letter
you definitely want to
sent yesterday to Secretary Jewell on the efficacy of Fish and Wildlife Association. That Kevin Davis, the guy who wrote it, put in a word in there, and I was like, that's not the word we want to use, because that's entirely debatable whether or not they're very efficient in their actions. It was just, like, I hadn't thought about it that way. That's the way I got it.
Okay.
So the description, that paragraph would just need to be rewritten that whatever level of service is being provided, you need to provide a description of what that service level is, and to include, how many hours at the station, et cetera.
But in the same token, I think whatever group you put together, however you decide to proceed, for this minimum standards about meeting qualifications, if you will, the whole document is very silent for performance. Whether that's something that wants to be addressed or not, that's certainly a public discussion. That is good public discussion to occur because I think the public has the right to decide whether it wants to have performance standards or not. And I know from the Chiefs Association standpoint, we didn't see that our role or our responsibilities for being part of our association to set a minimum standard of performance.
The performance.
Doesn't seem right. That's a very much.
Everybody has a little bit different idea of what a performance might be. Did they show up on time? Did they do what they were supposed to do? Then people are like, well, that's not what I expected. But it may have been the best level of performance that they could do under the circumstances.
Right. And then this document, the way I've seen it in comparison to some of the other stuff that's out there, is very similar to the ASA agreement for the ambulance companies, which is a very similar issue that came to the table years ago that required state action because they had multiple private ambulance companies responding to the same incident. You had no idea what their degree of service delivery capabilities were or qualifications. Required the ASA agreement. Well, when you look at the languages, really the only separation between this document and that document is the performance standards. So that's all stuff that needs to go through good public debate and review.
Well, I think that you need to delineate the difference. The ASA, of course, we contract with, we have an ASA area, we contract, this is under direction of the state, with a single company. This is a franchise that any company, we could have 2, we could have 4, we could have 20, it's not limiting it. A franchise is not limiting it. So I think that's where some people got confused on this draft that went out. They were thinking franchise is only going to be one service. There's not going to be, our intention, and a franchise is not a limitation to one service. You know, it's,
There's more than one hamburger joint out there. So.
well, I was just sitting here thinking of Dutch Brothers. They probably got 250 franchises out there all over the place. So a franchise is not limiting the service to one company like the ASA is. And so to you know, the distinction you were drawing there was the process that took place at the time the ASA was coming around. But we're not entering into a single contract. There could be many.
Okay, lady and gentleman.
I have one more
Yes.
question. I think the premise for me was outlined earlier on, maybe a couple years ago, but underlying potential liability to the county of constituents signing up for a private service or even a public service, and they're not having a minimum standards. I understood ultimately, and maybe you can express it more clearly, that there's a lot of potential liability with everything going on in the county, to the county. We are always cited. I mean, we you know, it doesn't even matter. But if there's something we could do to mitigate liability, I think it's in our best interest to try to do that. And if you could explain just a little bit about what our potential liability is.
Sure, I can, without going into particulars, I mean, if the county knows or believes it to be an unsafe circumstance or condition and then fails to act, then that could wind up getting us dragged into court down the line. That's
exactly
how you get that there? Okay. So
we just have to take every reasonable effort in my mind to make sure that what is going on in Josephine County by anybody, everybody, is done to the best, you know, possible standards as far as, you know, health, safety, and welfare, and that's our underlying responsibility here. So that's why we were just discussing options. This contract with them does not relinquish our responsibility for mental health authority of the county, for the public health authority. We can't escape that. Something goes wrong with options, they're going to sue options, but they're also going to sue us. So we can't escape
that's
it.
right.
And we've had
the power company negligently fails to prune a tree by the side of a road.
Right.
The county gets sued. So that's the
why
way
we
the
have our
world is.
vegetation mitigation plan.
Right? Well,
And if we didn't do it, we have a plan to do it.
we're Rob.
Yeah.
Rob's in the corner back there.
I think that Dutch Brothers is a good example because the public has an expectation when they go to get coffee about what their level of safety will be and the level of service to a certain degree that they will receive when they go to get that coffee. We've established building standards. We've established a number of different things within the county to protect the safety of the public. And I think that this is simply establishing that baseline that is attainable and that is drawn upon other already existing standards and simply put them together in one place to say this is that level.
Two things. One, everybody needs to understand that the emergency management person, i.e. you, is not a unilateral person that works above and beyond county. I mean, they work at the discretion of the board. And so none of these rules, regulations, or implementations are your little private exercise. They are working out as far as what the board, you're working under the authority of the board. So you'll have difficulties with you that in reality that's difficulties are with us as a board. So taking that burden off your back. The other thing, yes, yeah.
No, when you're finished, I just want to say I had one something when you're done.
The other thing is that however this thing works itself out, it needs to have momentum to a conclusion. I mean, I would be less than honest if I said, you know, I don't think these things are important. They're important. They're critically important in some cases, critically, vitally important. But yet, on the other hand, if somebody is out there saying, I don't care, I don't give a fat rip, burn my house down, I'll build a new one. Okay, I appreciate that. And would you care to sign a waiver saying that you will not sue the county for whatever? But that just becomes a burdensome process to enforce as well. Is there a common good, baseline common good, that's trying to be achieved? And I think, yes, there is. Now, the struggle is we need to have most of the folks, and I'm not talking 52% of the folks, I'm talking about, most of the folks, understand and support these things because they see it is for their personal benefit and personal good. That's the struggle to work through, and to try to, what do we do as the board, or what do we do now to see these things enforced with a reasoned expectation of completion by, and I'm just taking a date, by June 30th of 2017 or whatever it is. But there needs to be some line out there that we're moving toward and resolving these things.
Well, I think sooner rather than later,
Yeah,
2 years out.
yeah.
But the question I had on that was, we had talked about the other day that we hadn't put anything here, but fire services providing EMT services, and I couldn't find. Have you put that in the draft yet?
It's not in the draft yet, and we've actually received quite a few comments from different entities with suggestions or requests for clarification. So my suggestion, if we move forward with this, is that I can work with legal counsel to incorporate all of the different changes, and that anytime there's a request for a clarification, if it's not something that's easy to just put, a few words in there, that ultimately there's a group that looks at this to come up with the right words.
Well, I think there also needs to be an understanding that my definition of what needs to be done is also accepted as something that can be done or should be done. I mean, like saying, if you want to be a licensed district franchise in Josephine County, you need to be able to provide EMT training, or you need to provide ambulance service or whatever. Is that reasonable? Is that workable? Now, it might be great, but yet on the other hand, is that absolutely necessary just to make a standard? I would have a difficulty of saying, and I'm just picking on poor Wolf Creek. I'm sorry, nothing intended, folks. To say to them, okay, you need to have a qualified ambulance service as part of your fire district. They might have some EMT, they probably do have.
They do.
But the point being is to make that as a standard. I don't know if that's really a standard that the community would want.
No, I'm not suggesting that we make it a standard that it be required. I'm just saying that we need to put in here that if they have them in conjunction, there is no requirement. To my knowledge, I don't think any fire department is required to have EMTs.
No, the way that it's set up.
They usually have them, and so if you do, this is what you need to.
And I think there's a very clear delineation here between a public entity that's formed as a fire department, whether it be a special district or municipality, has a governing board elected by the community that dictates the level of services they're going to receive.
Right.
They still need to meet these minimum standards to be able to go out and do business and do it effectively and safely, and that's what that board's there to do. But in terms of the level of services, that's really a choice between that community and that service provider to decide what they want. So a fire department doesn't have to do EMS.
No, and I'm not suggesting that would be required. I'm just saying that,
but if you do these services,
if you do, this is what you need to do as far as standard.
And as a public agency, if we decide, or our community decides, we're going to provide emergency services in terms of EMS, they will let us know to what degree. Do they want a basic level, or do they want it all the way to where we're a transporting agency and now we're competing for the ASA agreement?
Right. It can't be a transporting agency because we have ASAs, and that's the state.
But that's a decision for that community to think about what level. At that point, if we go into the business of EMS, then we have to turn to the state health division, and they dictate to us now what those rules and regulations are about having a supervising physician and licensing EMTs and doing all that stuff.
Right.
So that really speaks back to this, and what the Chiefs Association did when it looked at the standards and said, hey, if you're doing this business, here is the basic common sense.
Right. So our reference to it could be so simple as that if the service provides it, you must comply with all state requirements under ORS, blah, 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 and OARs. And it's very extensive, very comprehensive, right?
And I think to the degree also that there are agencies or organizations within the county that are important to the county for the service delivery, so like the EMS board, having representation there or participation, so that they're integrated. I think that's extremely important.
Okay, so back to my question. What do we do now, folks? I mean, there has to be some sort of a committee or whatever we want to call it.
Well, I think that Jenny has collected all of these suggestions and recommendations and requests that people have submitted, and she can kind of make a list of all of those and then meet with legal and redraft to include those in it. Probably take you 2 or 3 weeks, I'm thinking, anyway, because you're snowed under.
But I mean, that to me now speaks of you're still trying to manage the outcome by arranging who's going to have the input.
Well, no, I'm saying that they prepare another draft.
Oh, yeah.
And then we bring the draft back and say, did we incorporate what people have suggested? Then you send the draft back out, like we did this time for feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that would be, this is out there. People can send suggestions and have. They send some good suggestions, on here. I made notes on them, but
I think they're really good suggestions, and there's nothing in any of the suggestions that I received that weren't a very reasonable request that I think would make the draft ordinance better.
Right.
So I do think it's appropriate to
Incorporate
them, take it back out and say, does this meet what y'all were looking for?
And Commissioner Harris says.
Sounds good.
Okay. So, if I'm understanding what's going on, we're going to have you as this focal point, collect, collate, distribute to us potential revisions. To us would include the fire chiefs. They need to have a clear understanding what and input as far as, and we arrive at a draft 2 or whatever. And then the next discussion is held on draft 2.
Right.
And put out, I don't think I interrupted you, put out for a longer comment period than what we did this time, because this again was just the, hey, we're thinking about, and now it's, hey, we've incorporated your initial inputs, let's really dig into this.
Right. Send it to the emergency service folks and to public health and all the departments, all the chiefs.
What I find kind of consistent with stuff is people think this is their issue. This is fire's issue. We have 100 issues that we're dealing with, so our process is probably not always what everybody would like for them. But we're doing, lease agreements with the Food and Friends, and Army Cog didn't like the way that went because they just got it out of the blue. It's like, it's not out of the blue for us. It might be out of the blue for you, but we're dealing with 150 different issues. I bet it's not less than that.
147.
Probably. All at the same time. And we're just doing them as they come and when we can get around to it. So they might be not very efficient, but I kind of feel like we're getting stuff done. So,
well, I think we're moving.
I just have to apologize is what I'd like to say, that it didn't go out maybe as fluidly in a process that people would
There's
like.
always a better way to do it after it has been done.
Probably.
At least it was done.
May I make a suggestion that Jenny and legal bring it back, say, to the admin meeting on the 1st of October?
Oh, I think that's realistic.
That gives you about 3 weeks or so to...
From our perspective, at least.
Yes. Now,
Everybody's here. Wait. From a staff perspective, I don't like issues that are non-routine to come to admin meetings. It's my personal thing. If we're using a lot of staff time by waiting for us to discuss something that should be a general discussion.
So when do we have the general discussion?
Interestingly, 2 weeks ago, this was a general. This is the second publicly noticed and publicly accessible meeting in like 2 weeks on this very topic. So.
Right.
What about September 29th? We have a general discussion that day. We're all here.
September 29th?
That'll be the second draft.
September 29th is Tuesday, right?
Yeah. You're here. We're all here. The other thing is anybody that inquired about it, like you had emails or whatever, send a second draft to them as well. Anybody that inquired about it.
well, then we
If you have it.
may want to push it back with all due respect, because I don't know how long it will take for legal counsel and I to put together a first draft. And I think that we should have not less than 2 weeks.
From my perspective,
2.5 weeks.
From my perspective, I like the fact that we are moving.
Yes.
I don't want to hasten the move. So if we need to move it back to October 6th and the 13th or whatever, to me that's fine.
You good?
Because we're moving.
Yeah, I would rather have a very comfortable 2-week or 16-day period where I can send this out again, certified mail, and have the assurance that they would have 2 full weeks to really review this.
Will it October 6th work? Okay, because the 29th is 19 days, so if we
Okay,
push
so
it
October
back to the
6th,
next
we're done with September though.
Yes,
So-
so we could go into October 6th. You say we're all here?
Everybody's here.
Let's plan on October
9
6th.
a.m.
Okay.
Does that work
And
for you, who are having to do all the work?
yeah, is that okay?
Works for me.
And to
Okay.
clarify, this will go out to any of the private or public fire entities,
Right.
EMS, 911, Public Health, Department of Forestry, any of those partners in this arena,
And anybody who inquired about
and
it
anyone who inquires.
Yeah. Okay,
for that second draft meeting.
are we all on the same page? Hearing yes and amen.
Amen.
Oh, was this on?
October 6th, 9 a.m.
Okay, so we will look forward to your product.
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much, Jenny, for taking this and running with it. And
Thank you.
Lang, for all of you guys
No problem.
working through this thing too. So.